edition of Artbeat. Hot dog stands as serious architecture. Photographer Patty Carroll captures the beauty behind the buns.
Well, I love this bite me thing. That's hysterical.
Catching a flick with Victoria Lautman in Chicago's changing movie theater scene. And can popcorn and painting live side by side on the Magnificent Mile? Hello, I'm Fawn Ring. Art in everyday places, coming up on Artbeat Chicago.
Funding for Artbeat Chicago is provided by the Polk Brothers Foundation, a foundation for Chicago families, the Lloyd A. Fry Foundation, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Sarah Lee Foundation, the Richard H. Driehaus Foundation, and by the members of Channel 11.
An observer of the modern world once wrote, "All that's solid melts into air." Those words ring true when you think about how different our city and the suburbs look from even a few years ago. Your favorite shop closes, a beloved theater company moves to a new building, a whole neighborhood is transformed by the arrival of a new cultural institution. If you can count on anything, you can count on change. Tonight, Artbeat's Victoria Lautman and Helena Kays explore how our cultural life and what we see on the street come together.
Gonna take a sentimental journey. Gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna make a sentimental journey to renew old memories. I've got my bag, got my reservation, spent each dime I could afford.
The single-screen cinemas most of us grew up with are a vanishing breed. In their place, giant multiplexes, some with restaurants and coffee bars, like here at the Century Theaters in Evanston. I'm Victoria Lautman. Today we're going to take a look at the changing face of movie theaters, where they've come from, where they're going, and how they've been forced to adapt in the 21st century for their very survival. When movies were the most popular art form in America, exhibitors Balaban and Katz built two of the most opulent movie palaces of their time, the Uptown in 1925 and the Chicago Theater in 1921.
Generally, a movie palace means a very large building with a stage, with an organ, with probably a balcony, with a lavish exterior and huge capacity. By 1929, Chicago had 12 theaters with more than 3,000 seating capacity, and 20 of them with more than 2,000 capacity, and altogether, counting all the cinemas, just within the city limits, there were more than 800 cinemas in Chicago.
Tell me about when the Music Box started, and it's not a movie palace, but what was it at the time?
Well, I think it was considered like maybe the baby sister or the sibling to the major palaces that were downtown. This theater was built in 1929, and for that day it's quite small. And the reason for that is when a film premiered back then, they would premiere at the big palaces downtown, the Chicago Theater, let's say. Then eventually they would move to the neighborhood theaters like the Music Box. It's quite an event to come see a film here. On weekend nights we have the organist playing, so that adds a little bonus.
Another wonderful movie palace is the Pickwick Theater. This Art Deco former vaudeville house was built by the mayor of Park Ridge in 1928. It seats 1,400.
The Pickwick in Park Ridge is a wonderful building. It's a fully equipped movie palace. It has a stage, it has an organ. It's never been compromised. It's been maintained over the years.
Determination and passion are two key ingredients to longevity, which a lot of independent theater owners just couldn't sustain. The owners of the Pickwick Theater have succeeded.
Well, an independent basically means you're on your own now. I mean, when we first got into business, everybody in that time, about half the market, people own their own theater. I think now there may be a handful of us left. Barnes & Noble approached me about 5 years ago about turning it into a bookstore. And at the time, we never got past it because absolutely there was no way I was going to convert it.
You got $1, 2, you got it. Yep. 2 now, 3, but I get 1, but I get 3, but I get 4, 4, but I get 5.
Other theaters have not been so lucky. The old Orchard Theater in Skokie recently closed its doors after 30 years of showing first-run movies. Major chains such as Lowe's Cineplex, General Cinema, and Meridian Entertainment Group have closed theaters in and around Chicago in recent months due to a market with just too many screens.
The Pickwick Theater Council was founded in 1999 as a grassroots community group to save the Pickwick Theater, and it became very clear to us early in our first year that we would be able to do a variety of live shows here, that the important thing is to get audiences into the space and show them what's possible. The Organic Theater Company just ended its first season at the Pickwick, which included a run of Romeo and Juliet. Film critic and author of the book Movie Wars, Jonathan Rosenbaum, talked with me about his thoughts on the future of movie theaters in Chicago.
So Jonathan, what do you think it takes to survive in the current film theater climate?
Well, I'm not a businessman, but at the same time, I think if you offer people more choices, and if you think in terms of long-term investments, which nobody does now, then you can build markets. What has been happening, at least in filmmaking, also in theater construction, is you exhaust existing markets, not that you create new ones. But maybe that's beginning to change, at least if we're getting more foreign films. I do think that there's something about the theaters that are being built now that are not user-friendly in the way that they were in the old days, because they don't appeal to the imagination. Going to a big movie theater in the first half of the century was something like halfway between going to Disneyland and going to a town hall meeting.
Some new theaters have intentionally tried to bring back that magical movie-going experience. Welcome to the future of going to the movies in a grand style. The Century Theaters in Evanston opened in 2001 with 18 screens, 6 of which are dedicated to art, foreign language, and independent films.
David, how do you feel about the fact that so many of the movie palaces that this theater is trying to evoke and other single-screen theaters are hitting the dust, and you guys are thriving?
Well, you know, it has a lot to do with Century Theaters paying attention to detail, knowing the market around them, knowing what people want, not just sticking to the 1 or 2 screens and depending on a good movie to come along to keep them alive. Century Theaters pays attention to detail, make sure that not only they have a beautiful, clean theater that's well-staffed, there's always somebody to serve them, the customer service details are there, they always know when they come in, not only going to get a good movie, but they're going to get serviced well.
Survival depends on having a niche that's unique. For the Music Box, this means first-run art and foreign films. And for the Pickwick, it's combining second-run and first-run movies with live shows.
Well, I think the future is very good. As long as we continue to seek out the best in international cinema, and as long as audiences in Chicago are willing to see something out of the ordinary.
Theaters do well for the community. Cinema is a part of the American experience. What we know of as cinema business is something that is uniquely American. I think there will always be the market for a film exhibited in a nice, comfortable, posh public place where the whole experience that we Americans have been enjoying for years is still available rather than just a little screening room.
I will withdraw. This intrusion shall now cease.
We study our literature, we study our history, we should study our art. We should make it a little more inclusive than perhaps it started out to be at the Terra Museum or any other museum. I don't think in any way one of the biggest cities in the country should feel that there's no room for a museum that's devoted to the art of its own country.
The Terra Museum of American Art is among the wealthiest in the city, with a famous collection and an address smack dab on the Magnificent Mile. But all is not completely rosy. I'm Victoria Lautman, and the museum is actually embroiled in a legal tug-of-war, which may result in it leaving Chicago for good. In a nutshell, one group of board members accused another faction of scheming to move the Terra from Chicago to Washington, D.C. That lawsuit led to mediation, and the outcome is still unclear. Former Terra Museum Director David Sokol thinks it should stay right here.
if 3 or 4 non-Illinois people disappeared magically and they were replaced by 4 people from Illinois, or from a phone book opened at random, the issue would be over. We need it more than they do in Washington.
Well, it's not so cut and dried, according to Don Ratner, CFO of the Terra.
We're looking at alternatives, whether we stay here, whether we sell this place. The land's obviously very valuable. The other alternative was to close this museum and move it somewhere else in Chicago. We also looked at other alternatives, which included affiliating with other museums, one of which would have been the Art Institute of Chicago, and 4 of which were outside of Chicago. No decision was ever made to move it, especially not to Washington or anywhere.
The museum's attendance has never been impressive, especially compared to Garrett's Popcorn next door.
Last year we had 70,000 visitors. Of those, approximately half of them were from Chicago. If you're only doing 20,000 people from Chicago, the question is, are you getting the bang for your buck?
What about Daniel Terra in all this? I mean, he's been dead and gone now, but he specifically wanted the museum here. It had been in Evanston for years. He tried to get other museums interested in taking his collection, which is why he founded his own museum.
I don't know that he was committed to Chicago. There's nothing that we can find in any of the records that says he was. In fact, there was a lot of paperwork that indicates he was very dissatisfied with the Chicago support of this museum. Whether he would have moved it or not, who knows?
Currently on view is an exhibit of paintings by Rockwell Kent. You might know his illustrations for Moby Dick.
The Terra Foundation for the Arts actually owns 3 Rockwell Kents, so it's a nice fit with our own permanent collection, as well as the chance to look at an understudied American artist.
And that kind of understudied artist is the kind of artist that we could expect to see in a Terra Museum show a lot of times?
Well, I think that we bring a balance of both the big names and the understudied artists. We're focused on American art from certainly colonial times up until pre-World War II. So we have a broad range of shows that we'd like to show. And we also show contemporary artists as well, but certainly the art that we want to bring to Chicago focuses on all kinds of American art.
By the way, do people get confused with Norman Rockwell?
They actually did a very cute little essay together in 1936 that said, when somebody asks me if I'm Norman Rockwell, Rockwell Kent says, yes, I am, thank you very much, and vice versa.
With an endowment of over $400 million, that probably makes the highest endowment to artwork ratio of any museum.
Well, I think the Getty would probably take issue with that. But for an American art museum, and especially for one that's really a relatively small size, it is really quite extraordinary. But you need to remember that Ambassador Terra's real focus was the education. So it wasn't just about amassing a large collection, it was how do we get the message out to people about American art and what it represents to us nationally.
The future of the Terra Museum here in Chicago depends both on the pending lawsuit and the public's interest.
Some of the civic leaders and cultural leaders of this city who have not been part of the support of it, I think could be persuaded to join if they saw that their voices could be heard, that their input as well as their money was welcome. And I think it could have a very successful life here.
The Terra Museum, as we see it right now, is committed through the year 2003 because we have an exhibitions plan and we've committed to our exhibitors, our staff, and everybody that will listen to us. They'll be here at least through 2003. After that, who knows? I mean, we never finished the strategic planning process. The strategic planning process could say, stay right here. Put the money into the building, fix it up, and stay right here. That's certainly an alternative. So, no, I can't really tell you what's going to happen.